Welcome to the Man Down Podcast. My name is Ted Knutson. Our goal in these podcasts is to fuck up your life, wreak havoc upon you and your friends in the best way possible. You might not even know that you need your life adjusted, but many of your friends and compatriots have asked us to do this podcast because they knew that they wanted a open, safe space for men to have honest conversations about cool stuff like relationships and sex and male friendship. And in today's particular case, we're going to start talking about dating. And we're going to do it in, I think, is a little bit of a unique way. Welcome my co-host here, Patrick Von Stratton.
Hello.
Damn it. I've messed it up again.
It was fine. It was fine. I'm not too offended by it. Yeah, it's good to be here. And today we're talking about your specialist subject, I feel. But genuinely, something that you do, but also something that you think about a lot. Whereas I think for a lot of people, it's an activity more than a topic.
I am a systems optimizer in my entire life. And in some cases, I've kind of broken microeconomies in different games because I started pulling at threads and like, ooh, how do I optimize this? How do I figure out how to break it? That's something that gaming people naturally do. And in this case, like we're not talking about the game, like pickup artist type nonsense. We're just going to talk about dating and ways to think about dating that many of you might not have actively thought about. But as someone who came back into the dating space from two long marriages, who had not really done much dating at all, but had done, lots of thinking and lots of long-term relationships, having children, built businesses of 8 and 9-figure businesses, coming into the dating space and thinking like really seriously about what the fuck is this and how do I figure this out in a way that I can make sense of it has yielded some interesting results, I would say.
Whereas I'm coming to this kind of as an outsider. I don't know that much about it. Even when I was single, I didn't really date that much. I kind of just like met people I liked.
You're like when Harry met Sally. You're like, I never want to be out there again. I never want to date again. If I can never date again, my life is at least a little bit of a success.
Yeah, I think if I have to tell a new person about all my baggage, it's the same way that once I thought, about changing therapists to try a different style of therapy, and I was just like, you know what? I can't be bothered to tell a new person all this shit. Whereas my therapist has been together for like 8 years, nearly as long as I've been with my wife. I'm not doing that again.
Is there a correlation between those two things?
I think probably the therapy has contributed to the marriage. And actually, you know what? The marriage has probably contributed to the therapy as well.
That's super funny. All right, so let's get into this. I think I took Patrick slightly by surprise in the framework that I wanted to put around this because it's weird. And weird is often pretty good. So we're going to talk initially about dating as a construct. And then we're going to talk more specifically about all sorts of things you need to know about dating and think about. In this particular episode, we're not going to talk about dating apps necessarily, because I think that that's like its own giant thing that we can have many different episodes on. But so for me, as somebody coming back into the dating space, there was this big question that many people don't even bother asking, which is, what's the point? Like, what are you trying to get out of dating and meeting new people? And I think that these often go through different phases in our life, but sometimes you cycle back to an earlier or a different phase that might be unexpected. So I think the number one thing that people look at from dating is the evolutionary one. Like they want to have sex, right? We have a drive to meet other people, to have sex. It's really fun. It's a basic human need. For men, it's very exciting. And there are lots of positives, but there can be a few negatives. I think that, sex is its own tangled type thing depending on where it's at in your head. Some people are super sex positive. Some people are very repressed. Some people have a difficult time releasing themselves into the casual sex space. Like they're only interested in the next two phases of dating. But I think that, especially in your younger days, like going out, meeting people, having sex is like way up there on the list of like good results that you're hoping for.
Yeah, I'd say that for a lot of people, it's kind of number one. Though they're maybe not honest with themselves about that, right? Which is where you're going with this. A lot of this is we assume that when someone's dating, we know what they're looking for. They're looking for a long-term partner, someone they can marry and have children with, all this kind of stuff. And obviously, these things change over time, and they're actually not the same from the start.
Right, exactly. And actually, I think nowadays we see that some of these phases are much more sustained than they might have been before.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
in earlier eras, you have your initial sex period or your initial don't actually have sex children, like, to have fake sex, have not sex, sex is illegal, sex is until you've been married, you can never have sex. Wow, what a disaster that could potentially be. So so you've got that initial phase there, and some cultures try not to have that phase, which is never successful, but they certainly can
Yeah.
encourage that phase to be non-existent. The second phase, I think, is probably the most common one. And it's also one that has definitely lengthened in how long people are pursuing it, which is a lot of people after they get through the initial excited phase. And actually, I think the sex phase is often like I had a slutty era, right? And sometimes when you come out of a relationship, you go back into your slutty era because you're very interested in like meeting new people and you're excited about having sex with new people because you've had, vanilla ice cream for the last 5 years and you'd like to potentially try a little bit of strawberry, maybe some cherry, possibly some chocolate, who knows? So I think connection is something about conversation is one of the worst things. So, how do I connect with it? I've lost him. He's gone. I did it.
It started at cherry, and I was just like, I can't. Sorry, carry on with your very nicely thought out ideas about dating. Oh Jesus. Okay, yeah.
I put it out on social media this morning. I'm like, I'm going to find ways to derail you and your thoughtful engagement.
That was a bad one. That was really bad.
Right. So back to second phase, connection. And connection starts with conversation, but sort of conversation, warmth, laughter, intimacy, someone to share our time, our thoughts, and our lives with. And it dovetails somewhat with the partnership phase 3, really. But this is for a while at least. So like you're trying to meet somebody that you can hang out with, have comfort with. Some people are very interested in, I want to meet somebody that I really like, that we have a good life, that I enjoy having sex with, but I also want somebody that can Netflix and chill with me. And if you're only Netflix and chill, like that's a disaster. There are plenty of other people in my local area who are like, I want to meet somebody that loves walks, loves Sunday roasts. It's so fucking trite in the dating apps. Walks and Sunday roasts are like, everybody's like, that's what I want to do on a Sunday or on a weekend. People in my local area also are weirdly interested in climbing and bouldering. I'm not sure why. Some people are circus performers, which I think is particularly specific to Bristol. Haven't actually dated one of those yet, but I want to, just for the science of it. I want to engage with them and ask lots of questions. Yeah.
I mean, is there a particular kind of circus performer that's top of your list? Fire breather, sword swallower?
Bearded man, mostly.
Sure.
Bearded lady. Who knows? No. I'm going to leave that for another day. Until I encounter like one of them, I feel like I need to, maybe it's like a Pokemon thing. You've got to collect them all at that point.
All the circus performers or all the bearded ladies?
Why not both? ¿Por qué no los dos?
Okay. Bristol's a good place to do it, I guess. But I mean, yeah. Okay. So what you're saying is that there's this kind of, it sounds like it's a limited pool, like in your direct area, and a little bit. Does it feel like people are maybe deceiving themselves when they're saying these are the things that I want, that they haven't actually really interrogated their real desires?
I think so. I think sometimes, and in fact, a lot of times in the dating app, people are just putting up prompts that they think are inoffensive and they can get through it. And and we'll talk a lot in maybe our next episode even about dating app preparation and how it's actually like a game and it's a marketing process and stuff like that. But we're going to talk a little bit about the product in a second. And the product, boys and girls, is you. You are the product in the dating space. But with the connection thing, before we wrap up, it's someone to share our time, our thoughts with for a while. It could be short term or long term, and often you're looking for your person or your people, right? Somebody that like you can actually have a good connection with. There's the trite saying that opposites attract, but the reality is most of the time we want people that has enough overlap that has to be fairly significant for us to then be able to create those connections. So some differentiation is good, especially if you find that interesting in your partner, but not necessarily a lot. And the other thing to note about this is it can be spicy. So, you can have sex in your connection, or it can be like quite a friendship-based thing. I think there are more people who are sort of asexual or realize that they're low sexual. And then there are plenty of people that are high libido people and,
Sure.
looking for high degrees of sluttiness, potentially with one partner or with multiple partners as well. So like connection doesn't have to be like, one-to-one. There are people that are happy to have sort of a roster, as it's described by the kids these days. A male harem by some people that you read on the internet. Who knows?
A carousel. Okay, but in this early stage, it's part of what makes it so exciting is not just the prospect of other people, but also the idea that you might be a different kind of person to the person you've been up till now, right? There's a wish fulfillment part of it.
So much of dating is actually seeing yourself reflected in somebody else, maybe a little bit getting to emphasize elements of yourself that don't necessarily appear elsewhere. And if I remember being excited about this when I went to university. When I went to university, nobody knew who the fuck I was. They had no expectations about me. I could be my natural self, or I could be like somebody else that I wanted to just sort of pretend to be and see if that person fit, right? And I was stoked about it because it meant that like no one knew all the dumb shit that I accidentally did in high school when I was learning things, or it's like endless lists of past that are gone. When you meet somebody new, especially in the app space, as opposed to, you're dating somebody new out of your friend group, like nobody knows anything. And so you get the opportunity to start over and craft your own story with somebody else. And it needs to have plenty of anchor elements that are truthful.
Yeah.
you need to not be a lying fuckhead that walks in saying that you're one thing and then the rest of your life indicates that you're other. But it is a little bit of a consistent fresh start, and also meeting somebody else who might be a perfect breath of fresh air and entirely different than what you have been with before, that may have, damaged you or you want to put in your past.
Yeah, what you said there, there's this idea that we might be lying intentionally, right? That we're trying to represent ourselves as people that we're not. But there's also the part of it that where we're lying unintentionally, which is, I guess this was a real like kind of 2012, 2013 like cool girl discourse kind of thing. But there's that temptation at the beginning to be as flexible as possible. You want to be seen as cool. You want to be seen as chill. You want to maximize your chances of hooking up. And so in those early stages, it's so tempting to just kind of flow like water and be whatever this person wants you to be. And this is how you end up in a situation where you're in love with somebody who doesn't want a relationship, or you're in an open relationship where maybe that's not really you. This is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, you can create all sorts of situationships for yourself that are significantly negative. And that's not really what I'm describing, but or intentionally describing anyway. What we'll talk about as we go on in this is like being very honest about what you're looking for. And we have other episodes about like radical honesty as well. Like you need to understand your sort of hard boundaries of what you want, your significant red flags of what you want. They shouldn't be too long, so that you can spend your time more wisely, because your time is the most valuable thing in the world. And where you spend your time and attention has a significant impact on your mental health, and it has a significant impact on the rest of your life, because time compounds. And so if you meet somebody awesome early because you discarded all these other people that didn't meet your needs, that's fantastic, right? As opposed to you waste years of your life, in many cases, your most attractive time period, because you were pretending to be something else, because you were not honest about what you were looking for, because you ended up with somebody that thought you were something that you were not, because you said things early on that were, untrue or not wholly true to yourself.
So, well, I'll let you carry on. I don't want to derail, because I think we're going to come to some of this stuff as we go on.
Okay, so the third thing that I think most people are looking for in dating is partnership. And partnership is more described as a life partner, a marriage, potentially with children. It is a person to share the bulk of your time, energy, and thoughts with, someone to live with. A deep connection, but also deep compatibility is required there. And it has to sync with where both of you are in your lives. Now, this could be a career thing where like you're career oriented. I need to go spend lots of time working on my career early on. And unfortunately, I don't have time to build this type of relationship with somebody else. Or somebody's coming out of a marriage or a long-term relationship. They might have children. They might be done with children and you want to have children. Like there's all sorts of reasons why, you have to meet people where they are in their life. You can't change that. Like you could potentially wait and hope that, they can come forward into some other space. But whenever you're in the dating world, in the dating space, like if you want to start a relationship, you meet them where they are, and you have to contend with all of these elements of their life. In your younger days, say your mid-20s, you typically have a lot of plasticity. You are able to
Mm.
be more adaptive to your partner and their needs, and maybe living locations. You could move somewhere because you don't have all of these anchors. Maybe you're excited to move somewhere else because like you want to leave your past history, where you grew up, whatever, behind. But then as you get older, you usually have more responsibility. You have more anchors in what you need to have in your life. You have commitments. And in some cases, you have obligations that you can't escape. And it's important for you to maintain those. And if you meet somebody that can't deal with those, that cannot be flexible around them, then unfortunately they don't make for compatible partners.
So is there a way that you would go about doing this, like a practical way? Would you sit down and kind of write these out, like the stuff that's non-negotiable, the stuff that you might be open to changing on, or is it just self-reflection?
Well, I think people that have kids usually have the hardest boundaries of what they need, right? And I've
Yeah.
dated some people who are moms, and they're like, I will only date men that have had children. And the reason why is because they absolutely need to understand the commitments that I have and where my priorities lie.
Okay.
And as much as I might love this man, like at the end of the day, everything comes back to the kids, and he has to fit in and amongst that priority set. I think that those often tell you like the most crucial things about where somebody's at. And the other side of it is some people do not want children. They want nothing to do with children. And so like that is like just like the biggest boundary number one. And then you hit the other stuff, which can be anything. So say like you are exclusively going to be open polyamorous ENM, ethical non-monogamy is what that stands for. And you're not interested in engaging with partners otherwise. Like first of all, that's mostly a younger characterization these days. Like it's not, if you're in your 40s and you're looking for people that are super up to speed on that, you might find yourself a little bit lacking in potential partners. But
Sure.
I know people in the poly community, and maybe we'll eventually have one on that is a guest. That is like, yeah, I don't engage with people that only have part-time polyamory. Like I'm not interested in that. I want to have multiple
Mm-hmm.
partners, but they need to understand what that means, and they need to understand sort of the level of romantic commitment, but also just how to engage and deal with your potential jealousy around these different partners. Because even though you're poly, doesn't mean you never get jealous. And I know some people that are open that do not want somebody that has hierarchical partners. So like, oh,
Sure.
you can't have a partner that is just definitely in front of me, right? And then other people are like, look, I do this in a way so that I have my life partner and they're always my most important person, but then we have some sex on the side and maybe we have some good friendships and stuff like that. And so there are lots of, you would say there are all the different flavors of love and marriage and relationships possible out there. You have to figure
Mm.
out what's most important for you, and then search for people that are there. And sometimes you got to bend a little bit. But if you don't know your hard boundaries on this, if you don't know your significant red flags, then you can get in situations that waste a lot of time and end up being ultimately frustrating or quite painful and hurtful to the parties involved.
That's definitely true, and even beyond the red flags, I think this is going to be a constant refrain on this podcast, but you need to try and know yourself. The less you know yourself, the more likely you'll be to go looking for a mechanic rather than a partner. You just want someone to fix your situation. So if you're exceptionally insecure and you've not done work on coping with that, then you might scare off a potential partner. You might overburden them. If you're a fixer, maybe you seek out somebody you can fix, or maybe if they don't need to be fixed, then you find it really hard to have an understanding of your worth in that relationship. So what are my tendencies? What are my triggers? How can I work on them? Do I have self-talk processes in place for managing them? If
Yeah.
you've thought through all that stuff, you're in a much better, you're 2 or 3 steps ahead.
If you have only dated sort of avoidant/secure people, and we'll talk in a future episode about sort of your attachment types, but if you've only
Sure.
dated sort of avoidant secures and then you end up interacting with anxious people, that can be like, oh my God, I didn't know that there were people like this, and that people, and especially if you like fall for these people, it could be quite a challenge for both of you because
Sure.
they even if they've done the work, like they just have much different cadences for what they expect and frequency of messaging and stuff like that. It's a little bit like saying like, hey, this is a cat, and my avoidant person is a cat, and they occasionally like attention, but they mostly take care of themselves, but they still need lots of attention and lots of care. Or then you get the dog that like wants to be on your lap all the time, and you're like, okay, I love this person, but I don't understand how to deal with that in a way that is best for their mental health and their security, but also me. And so that can be like a very big learning experience. It's not exactly the topic of today, but it is something that you will encounter specifically. And it leads me into the next thing, which is a lot of what you hear from the dating commentators, and there are lots of good ones. There are people that are better at speaking about this out there and giving you tactical thoughts and ways to think about it than I am, but they're much more existent than they have been in the past. The advice and the guidance is focused on how to suss out what your new partner is interested in and who they actually are without them explicitly telling you. Like you can get so much information by how people interact with you, but then how they don't interact with you. And one of the biggest lessons that you hear over and over, and I totally agree with this, is that actions speak louder than words. Now, this will get perverted into, if he wanted to, he would. There are plenty of times where women are finding ways to, not women, sorry, people who are dating are finding ways to be either negative about what's going on, but there are plenty of times where like there is elements of truth about it. So for example, if you wanted to, you would. There's another one that says, if a man's actually interested in you, he'll always have the time. Now, I'm going to give you the counterpoint to that, which is that if you're interested in ambitious men that are making very good money, often their commitment is to their work. Like, they spend 40, 50, 60, 80 hours a week at work. And thus, if you want to have the positives of having somebody with a very high income that is ambitious and has a great job, the negative side effect is that they don't have as much time for you. and it's great that they're not sitting on the couch playing video games all the time or out drinking with their friends. But the downside of it is they may have very real commitments to their job that don't allow them to interact with you for significant periods of time. And if you're an anxious personality that really wants someone to message you back within 15, 20 minutes, an hour, 5 hours of when you initially message them, you might not get that. Like if you're dating a doctor that is in the surgery room or here or there, if you're dating CEOs that basically live their lives 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day in meetings and guiding their company and doing like very focused work, you might have to wait until they're done with work before they get back to you. And they might have even business dinners and stuff like that. So it's being honest about what's going on there, and all of these things have exceptions. So the faster you can find out what your partner's like, what they're actually interested in, the faster you can sort of discard them. And all of dating, no matter what, is like this giant sifting organization. How do I find the people that I might be interested in that are also interested in me faster? And how do I communicate that information to them in a way that allows us to be positive and enjoy things while this process is happening?
How do you think that that's true overall? Because you talked previously about how women basically get inundated with offers, I guess, with people interested in them, whereas it's much thinner on the ground for men. So how thorough is the sifting process, or do you just kind of want to give everyone a shot?
So this is a strategic thing that we'll come to in a bit of time. I want to put a pause on that, but hold on to it because I think it's really important. The very short answer is you got to make sure you get through the door first. And then after that point, you can then sort of find things out pretty fast.
Okay.
A second really huge lesson that you'll hear is don't let yourself fall in love or obsess with a person that you barely even know. And this goes alongside texting is not a relationship. Now, as individuals, especially if we're looking to date and interact with people, we are inherently romantic in our fantasies, and we will often leap ahead to what we really want. And we will then start to fit this person into the fantasy shape that we have, even if we know very little about them, even if we know nothing about their compatibility with this. You have to be incredibly careful not to do that. And this is also a thing where you don't want to have long texting relationships. I promise you. And this is something that people are finally realizing. You might want to have a texting relationship onside your in-person relationship, but don't just fall in love with somebody because they've texted. You hear so many stories about somebody like, oh, I texted this person for weeks, and then we were supposed to show up at our date and they never got there. And sometimes that's because that person is actually in a marriage and they're not coming out of it. They're dating somebody else and not being truthful about it. But sometimes they get cold feet. They're not who they said they were. They were fantasizing some relationship on the internet, right? They got some models' photos, and then they were actually quite charming in their text, but they're not available to you. You need to find people that are available to you so that you can build something together. That is just the most crucial element about fucking around with this stuff and wasting your time.
So, okay, you need to not waste time trying to, living in your fantasy world. You need to be honest with yourself about your non-negotiables. What's next on the list?
Well, you have to be honest about your needs beyond the non-negotiables. So,
Okay.
are you gay, cis, bi? Am I flexible about these things?
Mm-hmm.
For me, and I think I'm comfortable with this. Like, I could actually be part of a happy, open E&M relationship, but I
Mm-hmm.
can also be part of a happy monogamous relationship. And
Sure.
I have been monogamous for quite a long time. And people would be like, "Oh, that's not possible." Like, look, I'm not jealous. And I'm actually, if I found the right life partner, I'm fully willing to commit to being just with that one life partner for the rest of our time. And hopefully that's the rest of my life. Most people are not that way. And so you have to be like very honest about that's what I'm looking for. If you're a bisexual man or a bisexual woman and you definitely want to have sex with the other sex throughout the rest of your life because you feel like you'd be missing something significant, that's a pretty significant need and restriction on the types of partners that you have. And I think that that's totally fine. And you'll find more people who are young that are able to take that on board. But it's not an insignificant thing. Like, it takes a lot of learning and maybe a lot of encouragement for your partner to find a space that they can fit the concept of this relationship into.
So some of this is kind of what I've heard you say before, which is you're creating enthusiastic buy-in or very clear opt-out.
You want somebody that fucks with you intimately. That is so hard. Like, I want friends that are like, dude, I love seeing you. It's so much fun. I want a boyfriend or girlfriend that like is very, very happy and wants to spend time with me, knowing that there are restrictions in their life that they not be able to spend all of their time with me. Like, so there's a balance, but you want to find those people and you want to find them early and as early as you can. But you also can't rule everybody out who doesn't look like this, because some people are, in a flow and they are able to change. They're able to take on new things. So yeah, you've got to be a little careful because you're very capable of ruling yourself into a population of zero if you have lots of restrictions on what you're looking for. So again, red flags, non-negotiables, but then be pretty open about the rest of what things look like, because there are some great people out there that look nothing like you expect them to be.
Yeah, this was something that I think I mentioned it on one of the other podcasts. I brought up Amir Srinivasan, who says her objection to I have a bunch of boxes that need to be ticked and all this kind of stuff is that we end up seeing people as these categories and we don't really see them as real people. We don't really give them the opportunity to surprise us. And some of those categories might matter to you. Some of them might end up not being that important. How many of us ended up with a person who was the most obvious fit for all the categories we had in mind? I would argue it's probably relatively few.
Yeah, basically never. Another big one that I think is becoming more of a thing is like, do you have a high libido? Finding someone with a low libido is going to be intimacy is really important for partnership. It's also important, like sexual intimacy, important for partnership, important for commitment. Obviously, important for sex. But if you're just going for the hangs and for beers and for chats, maybe that's different. Like, sometimes you can friendship date. Totally get that. The other side of the libido part is like, do you have sexual needs that are something in the realm of fetishes that need someone similarly compatible? So like you might have somebody that is capable of stepping into that role, or you might have something that's like pretty severe. I don't think severe is right, but like you might have like a very high need of the right type of sexual partner. And if you can't find them in a romantic partner, then you have to find somebody that's okay with, having something along the side that satisfies that. So the example for this is Billions, right? So for those of you who haven't seen Billions, Paul Giamatti plays a high profile district attorney in New York, and his wife, who is Maggie Siff, like one of the best actresses in the last sort of 10, 15 years. She's a therapist. She's great, but he has this need to be sexually dominated on a regular. So he's a big submissive. He likes the BDSM thing, and she does it sometimes, but also like even above and beyond her, like he will occasionally go to a dungeon, and they have an agreement that he can go do that as part of their thing because he needs that type of treatment in order to be like fully sexually aware or awakened. I'm not saying that any of you are like that. I'm just giving an example of how this might fit into your dating space. If you have really high needs in certain ways, that's fine. You just have to make sure that your eventual partner is aware of this and comfortable with it. Is your job fucking crazy and leave you little time for relationship upkeep? Like that's really challenging. If you combine that with an anxious partner, that's basically impossible. Can you deal with an anxious partner is another good question. Some people just can't. Like they cannot find the compatibility in that way. And learning about that very early is useful for both of you. So there are endless questions that might illuminate the path that you choose to take. And it's way more complicated than, is this person hot and funny?
Well, the sexual side of this seems like a huge improvement, right? Where 10, 15 years ago, it was kind of felt like we all had to pretend that we all wanted some idea of a sex life that has been agreed in popular culture. I'm going to be in a monogamous relationship and we're going to have very fulfilling but not too scary sex on a basis that works for both of us. And it's all now just seems much more explicit, the conversation.
I think it's such a breath of fresh air. And I think that it's so much more satisfying for so many people when they find it. But the other side of it is maybe it causes us to hook up with a long-term partner less because you realize that there are incompatibilities. And like in many cases, people don't want to subject themselves to a life of okay, infrequent sex, right? That's not what they're looking for. We'll talk about this in other episodes in the future. But there are times when marriages or almost marriages, whatever you want to call them, get into this phase where they're mostly sexless, and there have to be honest conversations when you get there, saying, "I'm not going to continue on in a sexless marriage. We have to find some way of compromising to either reinvigorate our marriage in a way that works, or like someone's going to stray. There will be infidelity in this region because like this is a basic human need." But yes, I agree with you. Like that's like the other side of it. You've been pretty successful at all this stuff, and then now you need to like maintain and sustain an awesome relationship. But I think that what we've done in the dating space over the last sort of 15 years is definitely make the sex component much more forward, much more open and honest, and in some cases more important than we might have thought it was otherwise.
Yeah, and well, I think we were always lying to ourselves, weren't we, about how important it was, or we got into this mindset of, oh well, men are dogs and they want to go and have sex, and women are kind of the gatekeepers of sex and they might deign to give it to men, who are the ones who really want it. It all felt kind of 1950s bullshit that had been ported forward. Okay, so how do you think about dating then? What is your... This is kind of the preamble to dating in a way. Right. This is the stuff you do by yourself before you date. This
is the construct and the ways to start to think about it, because when you think about it in these ways, then it gives you a guide as to what your process should be. And dating as a process is about, understanding you are the product, everything that goes into being and signaling that you are a good partner. Right? And how do I display that in a way that people can opt into it in, on the dating apps or in person? I had 2 long marriages, both of which came from becoming friends with people for, sort of 8 to 12 months ahead of time before I ever started a relationship. And that's like a much easier way to ease into a relationship. Sometimes you have to wait for other people to leave their current relationships, like, because they're entangled. Usually you don't have to do that as much in the online dating space, but so much more so now. Like, you need to understand yourself as a product and then what the customer is looking for. And as this is a men's podcast, I would say that the customer is whatever gender you're looking to date. And for most of you, that will be women. So women on Earth, and women also agree with me, bisexual women agree with me, they are mysterious. And often their dating partners still find them mysterious, but you can find help, you can find guidance on how to make yourself a more presentable potential partner. And that then leads you like into these different spaces, whether it's different apps or different places that you might try to find people. And also the things you need to do to yourself to become the most presentable partner possible.
So when we're talking about presentable here, I mean, I guess there is a physical element of it, but we're also talking about showing the characteristics that somebody would seek in that sort of person, right? Showing trustworthiness, showing consideration, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. So the most common things that women say they are looking for in a man, and some of the lists on the internet are long and overwhelming, but they do find lots of points for reflection and potential self improvement. So,
Hmm.
according to research and common consensus, the most important qualities women generally look for in a partner are respect, kindness, trust, good communication, emotional support, empathy, honesty, reliability, a sense of shared values, with many
Mm.
emphasizing the importance of feeling valued, understood, and safe in a relationship. Now, when you listen to that and then you compare that to the male media space, many of the bro positive podcasts, that is very anti red pill. Women are out there looking
Yeah.
for someone that has a sense of shared values with them. And when you look at the dating apps these days, like a third of them are like, no Tate brothers, no Tories, no people that are against like women's rights in different ways, whether that's reproductive rights or equality. And it's very, very clear. And like you don't want to restrict your ability to engage with as many romantic partners as possible. You want to keep that
Mm.
population very large. And if you're that type of person, you need to be very aware of the choices you're making at a young age. If you're a young man and you're like, oh, I agree with these guys, it's going to be really fucking hard to date and really, really hard to find a long term partner. And if you like women or you think you might like women, you might want to have children with these women, like that's a very bad
Mm.
mindset to have.
No, I completely agree. And actually it's been this way forever. You know, my wife today sent me a photo she took of a newspaper from 1989 that she was looking at for something to do with research, and it had the kind of dating section, you know, the singles thing, and in there, women saying, looking for a kind man, looking for a thoughtful man, looking for a non-sexist man, all this kind of stuff, and it's still the same. But yeah, there's a whole ecosystem of content which is pretty much made to make you hate women, to make young men hate women, to
Absolutely.
say that if you're earning under 250K a year, then I wouldn't date you. If you don't have a six pack, then I wouldn't date you. All this kind of bullshit. Real women aren't like that. And you, as a result, should not fall into the trap of believing that this is what the world is like.
There you go. Like this is the counter programming against that whole fucking basket of nonsense. Like women
Mm.
have made so many strides over the last say 50, 100, 200 years in little bits of equality, like constantly little bits, but there's still a patriarchy and it's still, and we have seen it come
Sure.
roaring back for no real reason other than fuckhead right-wing bro culture. It's
Hmm.
so horrible. So if you are capable of being a little bit sensitive and respecting them and treating them kindly. Kindness is super important. Like you do obviously have to be attractive. You have to get their attention. But there are lots of ways to be attractive, especially when you're in person. The other thing I found
Mm.
interesting was like a lot of the points that you search on either through the AI or through internet search. Women don't need partners who invest all their energy in trying to prove how strong, manly, macho, masculine, heroic they are. They don't need that.
Mm.
In fact, many times they're looking for somebody that's a little bit vulnerable. Can I control my emotions? Do I know how to handle it?
Sure.
Can I treat you with kindness when you need to be supportive? And that doesn't mean that you're not occasionally going to fall down in different ways. It doesn't mean that you have to be a perfect partner or anything like that. But when they tell you what they're looking for, you should at least be listening to that because it's important.
And if you are really, really invested in showing that you're masculine, showing that you're macho all the time in relationships, if that's really something that's motivating you, you are not treating, we're going into Kant now, but you're not treating the other person as an end in themselves. You're treating them as a means to try and deal with this unresolved thing in yourself. So then this other person, they're not another person to you. They're an audience for this particular point that you need to make, and the whole thing becomes a performance.
Oh my God. Yeah, I can tell you about that. I talk to people for since I've started dating. I was like, tell me your bad stories. Tell me your
Yeah, those are
horrible
the best.
stories. Tell me your horrible stories about dating men. And the one that is literally the most common is, oh, I went on this date with this guy and he seemed really hot or like he had a great job or whatever. And he talked at me for the entire date.
Mm.
They never get a second date. Those dudes never get a second date. And we'll talk about this in just a moment. But talking at somebody is the wrong way to go about it. And it's so unbelievably conclusive. If you would like to probably never have another date, just spew things at your female date for the entire time that you're there. Doesn't matter how nice the fucking restaurant is, doesn't matter like what you look like. If you do not engage with them as a person, showing kindness, interest, compassion, like you're failing in the date.
Yeah. So if you are one of those guys who, if you're in a meeting, you only address the other men in the room, then that might be a good learning point for you.
And why would you be like that? Like women have lots of interesting opinions, and they're more than 50% of the world.
You don't have to convince me, but we all know those men, right? Those men who start addressing you when it was the woman next to you who asked the question or something. If you know those people, it's a good thing to point out.
I have my ex-wife like was dealing with a number of things, and I'm not the DIY person. I'm also not the person that like helped design the house or anything like that. But someone would show up and they'd immediately start talking to me, and I'm like, I do computers and I run a company. Like you need her. She's the boss and all the shit. Like it's nothing to do with me.
It's so stupid, man. But like this is just genuinely the stuff. Like some of this is such a low bar to clear, but you know, not when we're talking about really being thoughtful and considerate and sharing someone's values. That's a bit more. But some of this stuff is just showing that if they go on a date with you, at the very least, you're going to be kind and thoughtful with them and not waste their fucking time.
There you go. That's exactly it. Like, and like everything else opens up from there. So when we talked about the sex episode, starting from kissing and physical touch, that's what sex actually starts from. Your dating starts from very, very basic things, but it's about engaging with a person as a person. Everything else from there, like it opens up. It's a flower that can bloom. But if you don't do that, like you never get anything. And you might even get, depending on how horny she is, like you might even get like physical interaction and nothing else afterwards. But that's pretty horrible. And that's not that gets boring very, very quickly in my experience.
Sure. Okay. So okay. We're talking now about, well, to go back to something you said before, the idea of being out there again, part of what makes me think I never want to do that again is the kind of commodification of myself, right? Is having to turn myself back into a product, like you're saying. Now, obviously, of course, you're still a product in your marriage. You just don't think about it as much.
That's right.
But how do you approach it then when you are getting onto the dating apps and you're aware that somebody has absolutely no context for the kind of person you are?
So I'm going to preface this by saying that we will have entire episodes on dating apps. There'll be multiples. We're going to get to make fun of me and my dating profile and how it was not good enough, despite the fact that I thought about it a lot and I allegedly somewhat clever. So the first thing, and the thing that is most noticeable, is step one, getting on the dating apps, is be more fit. You are the product. The more fit that you are, and you have limits, like it's fine, but the more fit that you are, the more physically interesting you are, the more likely you will get somebody to like pay a little bit of attention. And I have talked to many women, especially many women that get a little bit older, and they're like, yeah, look, the photo is still what grabs my attention, but then I actually spend real amounts of time on what they say in their prompts and like whether they're interesting or aligned with what I want to chat about, what I want to from a partner going forward. So they're much more like. And I talked to women also like, oh yeah, I sat next to my brother or, my ex-boyfriend or something like that. We were in open and I watched them like use the dating apps and just swipe, like everything's a picture. They never even engage further on the thing. And I was like, I do not do that. Like I read everything in people's profiles. Like, and if you're not including like interesting stuff in the profile, I assume that you're going to be very fucking boring in a date. Like if you have like a couple of like one word or even 5-word answers on your prompts on Hinge, or you're not including anything real in your profile, you're just relying on your pictures. And honestly, for me, like after having dated quite a few people, like it's a signal that you might not have that much to talk about. And if you don't have that much to talk about, like why am I spending my time with you? Because I would much rather spend time with people that are interesting and thoughtful and can teach me new stuff.
Yeah, fucking hell. I in the brief period that I was dating in this kind of era, I had to read everything, because at the time I was like, you know what, I think I can be attracted to basically any kind of person. I've dated, I think, quite a wide range of physical types, but if somebody writes the wrong "your" or "their," then it's not going to work for us. I'm really sorry, but like I'm a knob about this.
This is so much harder in London because it's so multicultural, and you don't expect people to always be English as their first language. But maybe you need that.
Sure, but then I need to have that information.
Okay.
Like I'm open to that part of it, but still, I'm too I'm too uptight for this.
Because
No,
you're just ruling out like all the hot Slavic women right there, and I think that's a critical mistake in your life.
no. Learn your, and then we can deal with it. I'm sorry, but I'm okay with it. I'll rather never have sex again than have sex with somebody who uses the wrong there.
Wow,
Yeah, that's how
your
extreme it is.
the pen is mightier than your pen, as it
Yeah,
were.
it's like logosexual is what it is. Okay.
So step one, be
The
more
first
fit.
filter is the image.
You just have to admit it, right? Like this is the game, and this is
Hmm.
how people interact with most dating. You can definitely, you know, interact with people in person and find those situations, and that takes a different type of character, right? You have to be okay with going and risking rejection and being patient about stuff. You have to go out into the world constantly, so like you're getting
Yeah.
less frequency. Maybe you're getting far less sample size than you would on the apps. And that's the other thing to like really remember before we get into these other things. It is about sample size. Like you might need to date a bunch of people before you figure out what you're interested in, what fits like what you need from your life, but also somebody who like engages with your weird in a very loving way. Like that's what you need,
Mm.
right? Like we're all weird in our own way. Like just admit that to yourself. But you need somebody that, fits your profile and then really is excited about your level of weird.
Yeah, that's definitely it. I think we can. It's not that hard to find somebody who tolerate those parts of you, but that is not going to last very, very long. You need somebody, like you said before, who fucks with it really hard. So, what's next?
Be funny and charming endlessly, right?
Sure.
Like Pete Davidson gets so many unbelievable women, and he's a little bit attractive. He's kind of a weird looking dude, but he's
Yeah.
fucking funny. And you find lots of stand-up comedians that hate themselves but have the most beautiful women that are alongside of them because they're funny. Women love men that are funny. Now, this doesn't mean like learn to tell horrible dad jokes. That might be your particular type of funny, but it does mean
Hmm.
like find ways to interact that are a little bit humorous in the world. Find some level of humor to put into your dating profile. My current dating profile doesn't have that much humor in it. It might be something that I can work on. It's really hard to.
Hmm.
I'm an observational humorist. Like I can banter with you for fucking hours and we can find out funny things to say. To
Hmm.
like condense that into into some little space
Yeah.
there. Oh my god, so painful. But the other counterpoint to this is be funny and charming, but don't be rude and don't be a pickup artist or fuckboy. Like so,
Mm.
so find ways to be funny that are positive and not neg. Like negging is, yeah. You
Yeah.
again, you get to that side of the internet and you're like, oh, well, you've got all this advice from guys that are apparently very successful at finding potentially attractive mates, and they're like, do they actually end up having long-term mates, or is it just like a
No.
series of brief encounters?
But they're right in the basic principle, which is that like when you are trying to be funny, this is an opportunity to flirt and to
Yeah.
introduce an element of what I think of as danger. Maybe that's the wrong word for it,
No,
but
you're right.
yeah, something like that to the mix. That's not, he's like my brother kind of thing.
Sparkly, sizzly type
Yeah.
conversation that
Hmm.
occasionally, touches the edge of the line. Doesn't You definitely should not be inappropriate, but you might indicate that you know where the line on inappropriate is, right? Like
Sure.
that's perfectly acceptable. And that's again an indication of intellect. And women want men who are intelligent and indicate that they might be a good partner. And good partner is a huge category that can have all sorts of things. But at the very basic, it means that you have a job or some progression towards a decent job, and you don't spend all
Hmm.
your time playing video games, and you could be a good provider. Like that part is super crucial because if you're going from beyond the sex side into some level of commitment, connection, and maybe partnership, like when you look on young people's dating profiles, they're like, oh, I want to travel the world. I want to eat great food. I want to do this. I want to do that. Those opportunities are open by having a good partner that has a good income and can be a good
Hmm.
provider. And if you want to have kids, you want somebody that can give you a nice home alongside of like having kids. They might not be there all the time, but the fact of the matter is if you've got a really good job, like you can help them afford a better lifestyle. And for many people, it's not the easiest time right now. And so like this is pretty crucial. So if you can find ways to indicate that in your profile one way or another, whether maybe it's your photos, you look good, you've got a sense of fashion, like you don't have to spend like oodles and loads of money. You need to just find some way that indicates that, yeah, you're probably a pretty good person or a pretty interesting person that is attractive enough to get through the door. Like that's the first filter. You might be a little bit funny, charming, like you're going to listen to them. And then you could provide, should you guys stay together, for some sort of better future together.
You're kind of taking out you're talking about it as if we're able to remove the gendered element of that. Do you think that's possible?
I think it's really challenging. I think that some things are pretty hardly wired either culturally or evolutionarily. And for many, many women, like if you wanted to really lower the sample size, then you'd be like, okay, then, I want a man who looks really attractive and can provide me these other things, but I'm capable of being the bread earner in the relationship. Many times when you're not a man that is indicating that they have a good potential job or otherwise, the assumption is that you're the type that, goes to the pub with their boys and plays a lot of video games and does other things, right? Like, what are you doing in your meantime? And so like, this is like one of the favorite tropes on the internet. Ooh, what's he thinking? Right. And then he's actually thinking about, who the leading goal scorer was in 2007 for the Premier League. But so many times, like, women are constantly wondering these questions, and then they'll fill in their own answers. And sometimes their own answers are like way, way more negative than the reality is, but you need to compete with that. So if you can provide substance that replaces their potential speculation, you're getting ahead in the game.
Okay, so what we're talking about in a way when we're saying this is less, it's your job as a man to provide for a woman. We're obviously talking from a kind of cishet male perspective here. So much as we're saying, don't seem like you might be a drag or like they're going to have to look after you.
There you go. That's exactly it. And if you're a drug dealer, at least be a drug dealer that has good fashion sense.
Yeah, exactly. Or goes on trips to Colombia.
Yeah, sure. Why not? You got to be a little careful on those. I have a friend who died from a heart attack in Colombia, possibly from doing too much drugs. Not sure.
Jesus.
Anyway. Look,
Oh
life is not always rainbows and sunshine, my friend.
I guess
I can laugh about this 8 years later and a decent amount of therapy, but
fucking hell.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So transition out of that. Okay. So a lot of this then is like less what are you doing than what are the kind of semiotics of what you're doing? What
It's
can they
about
read about you?
getting through the door. That's what you have to do. Like, I need to have someone that is willing to meet me so that I can then show all of the other things that are not immediately apparent on the dating app. So you have to admit that you are playing the dating app game, and then you have to learn how to play the dating app game as best as you can with whatever package you've got. You are the product. So if you can improve parts of that product, you should, because you have to play the dating app game. And then once you meet in person, then things dramatically change and you're able to display so many more facets of who you are and also like what you can provide. And you have these, and you learn so much more about the other person. But the first part is, how do I get through the door? How do I actually get dates with as attractive women as I can possibly find?
So in that first stage, it's the connection is very, very, very fragile. And then each thing they get to know about you that they like more makes it slightly less fragile.
That's right. Exactly. So accepting the above, which is I got to get through the door. Like once you're there, I have a couple of primary notes that should dramatically help most men find partners. And this whole podcast, like our whole future in this podcast is probably about potentially making yourself more attractive and giving yourself a better quality of life and maybe a better quality of life to your future partners. So the first thing, and the thing that is said so often from women, is be interested. The best way to be interesting as a man is to be interested in them. And that means finding questions that are interesting to them to answer, and also asking questions of them. Like, it is not an info dump for you when you go on a date. Like, you are not just like, blah, this is who I am, this is what I'm looking for, what do you think? You really want to find out about them. In fact, that's the place to start. In a bit of the same way as the place to start with sex is giving them things that make them comfortable, whether that's kissing, physical touch, being willing to, give oral as a man. Many of the things that like men are stunted about, you can be forward in a positive, giving way, and that makes you into a totally different person than if you're like, oh, I need these things, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're on a date, like you want to ask them questions that are about themselves and their lives. And like, what do you do? What are your hobbies? Oh, that's really cool. Like, give positive feedback. What are you passionate about is like one of my favorite questions that can't come right at the start, but like later on, it's really good, right? And people light
Mm.
up. You get to see a different person when they talk about what they're passionate about. That's so exciting. Like that's the person that you're really interested in making connection with on a regular basis.
And I think if you're a man as well, this is a really good opportunity to show that you're not like the dickhead type. By look, if you know a little bit about the thing they're interested in, then great. But if you don't know anything about it, it's a nice time to come clean about that and say, "Oh, I don't know anything. Like, I'd really be interested in learning about that." This is a really good way to show that you're not going to start a lecture series with them.
And then you remember what they told you. And sometimes you even
Mm.
follow up and, hey, I was looking up that thing, or I watched the first 2 episodes of this, and this is what I thought. You're creating moments of connection for
Mm-hmm.
future dates. If you had a good date, like sometimes you have horrible first dates. I have definitely had horrible first dates. but
Sure.
but again, we're starting with be interested in them and find ways to get more information, because what women do not want is someone who's going to speak at them constantly, who's going to mansplain to them about the things that they think. Because plenty of times they're as smart or smarter than you, and you're wrong about shit, or you don't have
Mm-hmm.
their perspective. And we just talked about building a shared perspective or understanding their perspective is super important. So listen to what people tell you, remember it. Knowing that your partner or dates listens to you is one of the best ways to allow them to feel seen, heard, and understood. And those are the crucial components in building a relationship.
Mm-hmm. And it's a kind of it's an indication as well that when if you guys get further down the road, if you have an emotional connection, if you get into arguments, all the kind of stuff that a relationship actually has to go through, you know that some of the building blocks are there.
Absolutely. And you can talk about things that you're passionate about too. Hopefully she asks questions to you. But so much is like listening, learning
Yeah.
about them.
Mm.
And sometimes like their responses and how they act tells you that, oh, I'm not going to be like an active involvement in this relationship either, right? Sometimes you're just like, so I had a date one time, and first of all, like it was an impromptu date. Like I didn't have a lot of time to arrange it. I didn't filter properly. And
Sure.
she showed up like 45 minutes late at quite a nice restaurant. I almost always go to like pretty nice restaurants early on, not like big tasting menus. That's a disaster, because if you have a first date that goes bad and you're into like a 2.5 hour or 3 hour tasting menu, horrible. But I
Or if
do
it
try and
goes really well and by the end you've had like 20 courses and you think, oh Jesus Christ, I don't want to have sex now.
Oh, that's also, yeah. Be careful about that. Or you're
Mm.
like super drunk and also like hard to have sex. Like there are all sorts of
Sure.
like missteps in that one. But so it's just a pretty nice restaurant that I was super excited by. The maitre d, or sorry, the waiter and the sommelier felt bad for me, and they were like giving me extra pours on like the first 2 glasses of wine. So she shows up like 45
Woof.
minutes late, and then the entire time I had to keep asking questions just to get any sort of conversation. There was
Mm.
nothing. Now, this was a person who had a master's degree. Like, it's in their dating profile. I was like, oh, she's going to be, smart. She's going to be able to have like a real conversation. It'll be fun, right? It was a master's degree in something fun, like psychology. Like psychology people can
Mm.
talk about fucking anything. And you're like, oh, this will be fun. Like this will, yeah, I spent the next hour and 15 minutes just like asking another question of the most basic type to get any sort of interaction. And maybe she
Mm.
didn't like me, that's fine. Or maybe like it was just a terrible, terrible first date and someone that I never should have gone out with in the first place. But yeah, like sometimes you will just have awful ones. The good part about awful dating and the perspective that you always need to have about dating is, as a process, you should
Sure.
try to enjoy yourself meeting new people. Meet new people, have interactions. And the other side of it is you get stories for the group chat, for your friend group, and for yourself to store later. So if you have really shit first dates, it's a good story. And if you got a good story, you got something out of it.
And that idea that it's how you approach new people, like it's everything we're going to say here, or most of what we're going to say here, is totally applicable to if you want to be a good dinner party guest, if you want to do well at networking events, going up to people, being interested, not being smug, and asking them questions is the basis for being the most interesting person in the room in almost any kind of social interaction.
So be interested is like the single biggest clue for having potentially good first dates in person. The next one is be kind. Like just be kind. Go out of your way to be kind because it's noticeable. Like if they're late, hey, no problem. Like do not be OTT on any sort of text, anything like that. And if something goes badly, like you can just be like, hey, it's not a big deal. Diffuse the situation over and over again. Make it so that it's not a big deal because they're potentially very nervous as well. Like you need to understand the other person's perspective and be empathetic towards it. And so as much as possible, just be kind through the whole process because it can be very stressful for everyone involved. But if you take it as like, I'm relaxed about this, I'm happy to meet new people, I'm happy to have new experiences, and then you push that through the whole experience for the other person, that's a great indicator that you might be somebody to hang out with in life that is going to also give you these things because you'll have other stressful situations. And if you can make them feel relaxed and safe, and like even when things go bad, we can still have a good time. That's a fucking awesome indicator that you might be a good partner and somebody that deserves a lot of their time and energy.
And I just think with some of this stuff as well, like even a bad date, you would like to come out of a bad date at least feeling like you were true to the person that you would like to be.
Yeah.
So if you're kind and you ask them questions, if they give you nothing back, then at least you don't have anything to be ashamed of yourself when you get out of that date.
Yeah. And then there's other things like, be over your ex. Don't talk about your past experiences a bunch. Like don't bring like all of your baggage even to like the early dates because like that's not great for building a connection. Sometimes it's also like a big red flag. They're looking for stuff to like, rule you out. If you talk about your ex regularly, and I've had a couple of dates that did this, like, okay, this is not clear. Like you are not in a good space for us to build something new. Like you have to deal with your past baggage. One more element about this, and the final thing is be interesting, right? And one way to be interesting is to have good hobbies, like to be interested in the world as at large. And it doesn't mean you have to throw all this stuff at them, but you might have one or two things that you're happy to talk about that you think are kind of fun. And if you date a few times and different people, like you can see what the reactions are and like, oh, that's a pretty good topic to talk about. And, oh, that's like really fucking boring. Let's not do that. Let's not talk about manga and hentai and all these things, unless your date brings it up first, in which case you can show all of your incredible expertise.
God, hentai expertise. Again, how do we move on from this? I don't know if somebody started
are we flogging a dead horse here?
Somebody started to. I mean, there's probably a hentai about that. But if somebody like tentacles. Okay, so yeah, being interesting. So having things that you're passionate about. If you're going to ask somebody what they're passionate about, then it would be good to have an answer if they turn the question around, right?
Yeah, and
not feeling like it's.
Exactly. And learn more about yourself about which things are approachable for a different party and which things are not, right? So,
yeah,
I don't necessarily talk about Magic the Gathering. I don't really play it anymore, but I used to play it a ton and travel around the world. But I can talk about traveling around the world as part of a job that I had where I covered this silly card game and they paid me to travel around the world. I'm lucky enough to have lived a very interesting life. And so, sometimes they're like, oh, what do you do for work? And I'm like, oh, I'm a professional gambler these days. And they're like, hello? It's like, well, it's a long story, but we can talk about that. But I will say, if you struggle for things to talk about, one of the best things to talk about on an early date with your potential partner is your love languages. And this is like such an easy thing to give an indicator that one, I have read some of the research about forming, modern dating partnerships and relationships. That's really useful. Also, I know the ways that which I can communicate to you that I understand they show me that someone loves me, or it's natural for me to show someone else that I love them in this way. And those are great, great early indicators that just say like, oh, okay, this person has a tiny bit of their shit together and might be interested in doing this more in the future. That's valuable.
So have you actually spoken about that on a first date? Somebody has said, these are my love languages. What are yours?
Yeah, sure. Or like, sometimes it'll just come up. What are your love language? Sometimes I get asked like, when was your birthday? And I'm like, oh dear. And I have to like laugh at it and figure out how far we're going to let this one play out, because obviously I'm a science rational based statistician type person. And, horoscopes are fun and that's all that they are. And yet I'm like, are you really going to rule me out or in based off of the day that I was born on that has nothing to do with the other 40 some odd years of my life?
I love it when people want to talk to me about horoscopes. It makes me laugh every time, because I'm just like, I always say, yeah, I'm a Leo, and they always say, of course, and that just kills me every time. And then I look it up and I'm like, oh fuck, this is exactly who I am. But yeah, I don't know, like. You can't get into that. There's a rabbit hole. I promise we will never do an episode on horoscopes.
Ooh, we might bring a horoscope person on, but not tell them who we are. That'd be fun.
That would be very cruel.
To the audience or just to us?
Just to them.
So yeah, I think that, first of all, listen, be kind. And then the last bit is like, just find some things that, you can delve into that you're comfortable chatting about, that come easily to you, that show a little bit of who you are as a person, but don't always expect that they'll be interested. That's fine too. That's why you have to learn to have like natural flowing conversations. One last note about this type of stuff before we go towards our wrap up. Also listen to people when they tell you who they are. I think this is so important for avoiding mismatched expectations, and mismatched expectations is usually what causes things like lots of hurt, pain, and things to come crashing down around you. So I'll give you a couple examples here. I'm not looking for anything serious. If the woman that you meet, maybe you've gotten through your slutty phase, maybe you're very interested in finding like a long-term partner. I'm not looking for something serious. You can take that at face value, because if you're at a serious point in your life, you'll probably be sorely disappointed, and you are unlikely to change their mind no matter how hard you try. And for certain mindsets, you got to know that shit, because it will break you. It will break you in half. That's not a joke. Like, I've seen it happen. Like this shattered wreckage of dudes who are friends who found like who they thought was their perfect partner. Sure. They told them up front, I'm not interested in anything serious. And they're like, oh, if I just wait long enough, like, I get to spend time with this person. And if you can get yourself to the point where like, I'm just happy to spend this time with this person and I'm not worried about spending the rest of my life, like I'm happy to take whatever time that I'm going to get right now. That's a different mindset than this is my life partner. I want to have babies with this person. Like I want to spend all of my rest of my life with it. And then eventually the person's like, this is way too serious. I don't like where this is going and I need to break it off. There's another one that I have that I heard recently. I don't really date. It's like, okay.
What does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. So amazing woman, but she says that I don't really date. And I was like, this is okay. Fantastic chemistry between us. Like just so good. And I didn't know what it means either. And I'm not even sure that I totally know what it means now, but it was preparing me that all the things that people expect out of like a real relationship, so I'm dating, right? That means like I'm available, like I'm potentially happy to keep up with a person, messaging from afar, like I'd like to see you regularly, all of these things that you would expect from that. She was like diffusing that to say like, oh, I might occasionally pop up, like, I might message you from whatever. You might hear from me about once a week. You're welcome to send me messages. I might even interact with those if I've got time and energy. But really, probably not, because my life is busy and I only have so much space and time. And so no matter how well we hit it off, like I'm only going to get a little bit of her attention and a little spot in her life when it's convenient. That was setting my expectations. And so that, if I'm frustrated with that, it's on me. It's not on her. That's really interesting. And sometimes you find in older women, and I'm not limiting it to older women, but sometimes you find in older women that their lives are so full with everything else they have to do that, as a man, they're okay with like some occasional time with you, but they don't need you. And they don't necessarily need to spend a lot of time with you. And if that doesn't align with what you're looking for, listen to it, because they're telling you the truth.
Yeah, my wife and I have all, whenever we'll watch like, I don't know, Married at First Sight or whatever. And we always say one of the advantages of dating beyond a certain point is that you've got so many commitments and you've also probably had your time wasted so often that you have zero tolerance for bullshit at a certain stage. And people are just going to say to you, this is what I can give you and this is what I want. And if you're not okay with that, then this is not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that will occasionally break your heart because you're like, wow, you're awesome, but sure. I can't get the time and space and energy that I need. And so like, I can't pursue this. The other side is the flip side of it. And this happens pretty regularly when you're a little bit younger, maybe your late 20s going into your 30s. I'm dating to marry, or I would like to have more children. And like if they're telling you that pretty early on, like they're serious about it. Like they're intentional about what their needs and their interests are. And if you violate that, Yeah, yeah. But like some women are like that. Like, this is
Yeah,
what
fair
I
enough.
want. And not just women, sometimes men too. Like,
Yeah.
I'm looking for my partner. I would like to have children. It's great, right? Like, we need more
Mhm.
children in the world. We're going to have a massive shortage of population in a
Yeah.
generation or two. But no, this person is clear with their intent. And if you are not that person and do not want to be that person, you should be honest with them. Because again, you might
Mm.
get way down the road and, you might end up being a kind of a horrible person for misleading them. If that's the case, you might feel terrible about it in the future. You might look back on it and be like, oh, I missed my chance with like the person that should have been my life partner, but I wasn't in that space at that time. Yeah. So it's just about trying to be honest up front, listening to people when they tell you who they are, and
Mm.
assuming that they're telling you the truth. Because if they're telling you pretty early on that these are the things that they want, they're looking for, yeah, why would they be otherwise? Like, and don't assume that you can convince them to go in your path, because that almost never happens.
Yeah, that idea that I can fix somebody is so tempting. I can make them what I want, but that last point as well on the dating to marry thing, especially if you're somebody who dates women, it is your responsibility to be honest about what you want, because you can't waste people's time. It's not on.
I have i have been asked if I'm interested in having more children,
Hmm.
and I churned on this thought, and I'm a pretty good dad and I like kids, and I think I would be a good dad in the future. But also, like, the idea of becoming a dad at, age 48, 49, 50, find that
Mm.
very challenging to accept. I do have two older friends who quite successful in business, who ended up having kids right about this time. Like, they basically met a woman that was mid
Okay.
30s. They were very into them, and they're like, I can do it. And in fact, one of them like blindsided me. I hadn't seen him in about 18 months or something. He'd wrapped up his past relationship. I was really busy being out of the country. And and so, like, the last time I saw him, we were having coffee in central London, and he was telling me about, like, the dissolution of his last marriage or whatever. And the next time I see him, he's like, "Sorry, it's taking me so long to get back to you. Like, the baby obviously is taking a lot of time." I'm like, "The what?"
The
The
fuck?
fuck you do?
That's
It's like,
that's a really quick turnaround.
I look, I got my
No
ex-wife pregnant.
judgment.
I got my ex-wife pregnant within 6 weeks each of the times that we decided to start trying. So, like, I'm kind of comfortable with this
It's
level
pretty
of
good going.
fertility.
That's pretty good going. Christ. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I guess I can understand. I suppose being in that situation and thinking, well, this is the thing this person wants to do, and I want to be with
Mm,
this person,
there you
and
go.
I don't mind doing it. It's just that like maybe I would prefer not to, but you kind of got to commit if you're going to do it.
Right. It's the deal breaker for them. And if you find
Mm,
somebody like really, really special, you might do a lot of soul searching and figuring out, like, am I willing to do this one more time? Might be weird for your current kids to be
sure.
like, oh wow, dad's got a new kid with I've looked, there's all sorts of things to think about. I'm not comfortable with my answer on this, so I can't even, but I have had two older friends. Like, one guy dropped his son off at St. Andrews and then, like, had to come back and take care of his 2-year-old.
Oh,
So,
Jesus.
so
Oh my
16,
God.
17-year gap in between the children there. It's like, whoa.
This is going to give me hives, man. Like I'm in this stage where I'm like, okay, we're X number of years from coming out of like the really early stage. And don't get me wrong, like I've always loved babies and toddlers, so I really enjoy the early stage, but it's fucking tiring. Like, so yeah, this is why you're doing your yoga, right? Just in case.
As an older man, I also have that very critical sort of set of thoughts about, if somebody's got a 2 to a 4-year-old, is that too much for me? And
Mm.
and like, that's
Hmm.
that's really challenging. And it doesn't make you weak. It makes you have to be honest about other responsibilities you're willing to take on. And in fact, that might be
Yeah.
the most important thing. Like, if you're taking on responsibilities for somebody else's kid and helping raise them, and in many cases, it's a partial responsibility, but it's still serious. Like, don't fuck up other
Mm.
people's kids. You do bad enough. Like,
Yeah.
so bad. So anyway, in conclusion, like, listen to other people there. And to wrap up, I think the way that I've gotten to with the whole dating thing, and I think this is right at like every point in your life for the most part, be process oriented, not goal oriented. So when you're dating somebody, you need to think that I'm going out to enjoy social interaction with someone new. There's no pressure on this. If you diffuse the pressure of like your expectation and what you're dating for, like, you can have fun with the process. Learn as much about the person as possible. Enjoy the time you spent with them and out of your house. It's nice to get out of your house and be
Mhm.
hopeful for the best. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to worry about, I need to find my wife, my soulmate, my baby mama as soon as possible. And I need everyone to like and love me. Like, if you take the
Mm.
pressure out, you realize that you're going to have to date probably a bunch of people, especially as you get older, to find people that are compatible with you, people that you are compatible with, that you can also fit into each other's lives and are okay with the commitments. Like, you realize you got to meet a bunch of people. You just do. And there are certain times in your life that you're capable of like being forced together with people and then adapting to them, and great. And then as you get older, like, it's much more challenging. But if you diffuse the pressure, you take out the expectation of the end result, and you just say, this process is actually fun for me. I like going, meeting people. I like chatting with them, even if like we don't hook up. Like, maybe I say, hey, you were kind of cool. I'm not sure if like we're romantically compatible, but like, I'd like to become part of your friend group or anything. Maybe you want to come to like a board game night or something like that. Like,
Mm.
open the door to be to have more friendships and more in-person interactions. And then maybe, and I know this is true, sometimes they introduce you to their friend, and their friend ends up being your soulmate. And so like,
Mm.
you create more moments of serendipity, more luck surface area to walk through life, and potentially have these meet people that you fall in love with.
Yeah, if you this idea of being process orientated is very powerful, because I think it's so easy to slip into that judgmental role, where you're assessing, is this person good enough? Do they tick all these boxes? Or and that idea as well of somebody wasting your time. I mean, there are specific circumstances, like if someone wants kids and you're not honest, but it's hard as well to see somebody as wasting your time. That becomes kind of nonsensical if you're seeing the whole thing as an exploratory process, meeting new people, trying new things, getting out of your comfort zone.
Learning about people that I do not want to see, learning about people that have archetypes that do not fit with me. And
Mm.
so that helps me be more precise in my filtering process, which is the whole dating app thing of finding the next person. And sometimes it's like, as I said, when I had a time where I had, a short period of time to set up a date, I didn't do good filtering. I didn't have like enough conversation to figure out, were we going to talk a bunch at dinner and have fun? And it was a disaster. And so, like,
Mm.
figuring out how to do the filtering process better for yourself, or to get through the filtering process better for somebody else that you think is attractive, that, you want to get through the door and meet them in person. Those are both really valuable lessons. And sometimes they take reps in order to figure it out.
Yeah, making peace with that, with the reps, the iterative process of it seems like a really fundamental part of it. Do you enjoy it now? Now that you are dating, now that you've kind of you've gone through being more of a rookie, and now that you're a seasoned pro.
Oh God. It depends on where I'm at in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, for those of you who don't know, recently went through a breakup that I thought I chose, and then actually realized that I had a full emotional breakdown after I sold my company. And I didn't really choose anything. Like, I got rid of everything that could possibly cause conflict, came back to that. And I started dating. I was like, oh yeah, I'm great. Like, this is fine. I've got freedom. And then 2 months later, I was like, I'm really sad. Like, what the fuck's going on? And
Mm.
it took me another 3 months to both figure out what the problem was, to try and reconcile the problem, and then realize that that was not going to happen because I fucked it up too badly. And then at the end of it, all of the sadness that you're trying to work through. But I think as we come into spring, there's more light, and I'm getting to the point that's the other side. I'm making myself, in a space where I could be emotionally available. Yes, I can
Mm.
go back to enjoy it. And I do like meeting new people. And it's fun to have like those sexy little moments where, like, oh, there's a spark here. Or
Yeah.
like, this could grow into something. Or they said something really funny. Or they taught me something that I've never learned before. Those are all really good moments in life. And if I can create more of those moments, I'm excited about it. So I think that's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you everybody for listening to our first podcast on dating, and to the Man Down podcast in general. Like, subscribe, show us some love in the comments, show your partner some love, and hopefully, if this has helped you, like, definitely tell us, because this will help us choose like different episodes. It'll help us prioritize different topics. I think next week, or possibly in 2 weeks, depending on when you're listening to this, we will start to release the things on dating apps and how to improve yourself, as how you show up on dating apps. And you can, at least according to some of my scientific research, improve your responsive user responses from these dating apps if you can improve what you're putting out there. And then maybe we might have an expert on that will take two of you as volunteers, and she might then improve yours. But you have to agree to submit to the process, which could be quite painful, at least in my experience. I was like, oh, I feel really dumb.
But you're less dumb at the end. That's the main thing.
Exactly. Every day that you come out a little bit less dumb, like that's a successful day in some way.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
All right. So for those of you who are listening, thank you so much. Patrick, say goodbye to lovely people.
Goodbye, everyone. We'll see you next time.